Hi, this is Tim of the WatchBox at Dubai Watch Week 2021 with Editor-in-Chief of Quill Pad magazine, Elizabeth Doerr. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Tim. Nice to see you again.
Now, the last 2 years have been crazy. This is our first Dubai Watch Week since the last one, which is normal because they do it every 2 years.
Right.
But this is also the first real integrated watch show we've had in 2 years. How's the landscape changed for journalists who cover the watch industry since COVID broke?
That's a good one. Well, we've had to gather all of our information digitally, haven't we? We've used Zoom and electronic media and ways to connect with people, to see watches, talk to people. We've kept in touch, but that personal touch has really been missing. Now in Europe, I'm based in Germany. In Europe, we've had 2 editions of Geneva Watch Days, which has been a very loose watch fair.
And it's dispersed around the city.
It's dispersed. It's very safe. It's also not very organized. So they sort of, Bulgari was the organizer, and they sort of put down the dates, and then everybody booked a hotel suite or went into their boutique or whatever they were, going to do there. And it was really safe because you hardly saw anyone, who wasn't involved in whatever your appointment was. So we've had a little bit of touch and feel, but those editions of Geneva Watch Days were, I don't know how else to say, buoyant, joyous, because it was sunny, it was warm, it was beautiful, and we hadn't seen people or touched watches. So that was really nice, but I have to say here in Dubai, I feel that that's even more because we have the whole watch world here. It's not just Geneva, we have the whole watch world here. We have the Americans and people from other countries, India, et cetera, et cetera. So you feel like you're seeing everyone again, which is a really, really nice thing.
Okay, so there's a lot of uncertainty among watch collectors concerning what is and isn't journalism in the watch space. It's not easy to tell the difference between an ad, a blog, and a magazine anymore. How do people sort the wheat from the chaff when learning about watches through journalism?
That's a tough one. It's classic journalism almost doesn't exist as such, and I don't want to toot our horn. We're small, we're flexible, we're not a huge structure like a lot of other publications, but we're probably the only ones left who do it in the classic way. The ads are visible. We mark our partners. They're completely and entirely marked, and everything we write is what we write. It's not paid for. There's nothing going on behind the scenes. Unfortunately, that's not the case everywhere, and every country has different laws governing that. You're supposed to mark advertorial. I don't know if it is marked everywhere or if it's even necessary according to that country's laws. I don't know. So there's a lot of crossover, especially in the print area right now, more than there has ever been because print is struggling and ad revenue has fallen and they've got to find new ways to get money flowing. What's what is really hard to tell anymore. A trained eye can see it. The consumer might have more trouble seeing it. I'm not entirely certain what people are doing anymore myself.
I get that you're at the point where you realize, I can speak for myself and say we're journalists, but the rest of the blogosphere, and a lot of them are just blogs, they're not magazines like Quill Pad, but it's very difficult to tell when you're looking at advertorial. And I would even go so far as to say, people don't know how it is that you can be dependent on the watch brands for access, because journalists are, and still be objective. How do you balance the need to gain access with objective evaluations of the products, which are incredibly expensive things?
Right, obviously. Well, our approach to this is the same as it was, my approach, the same as it was 30 years ago. Basically, if you really don't like something, you just don't write about it. Why would you waste space, effort, or energy on something you dislike? So if it's not appearing in our magazine, most likely we just don't like it, right? If we write about something, obviously we're going to like it, so there will be that. You can read that out of the words, but if there's a niggle, we certainly put it in there, and we get backlash for it sometimes.
Yeah, it's very difficult. First of all, most luxury watches are a lot of fun, so there are very few bad watches in that sense.
Right.
When everything's a Ferrari, nothing's a Yugo. But it does seem that way sometimes.
Right, yeah.
So another question people have is just whether print itself is dead. Now, online publication seems to be the rule. We're seeing a lot of video, more and more of that. Is there still space for magazines that are printed and bound?
I believe there are. I personally prefer to read paper books rather than digital books. So I know there's a space for print because people like me prefer it. And it's not just me being an older person. I know younger generation people who prefer books over, I don't know, a Kindle or something as well. So I suspect that magazines with their big glossy pictures and beautiful paper also have the same allure for certain people. I like to read magazines, but I like to read the type of magazines that tell stories rather than push product, because again, it's sometimes really hard to tell what's going on. And coming back to that for 1 second, for the consumer, it might be easier to tell what's happening in a publication if you look for ads. If you don't see any ads, that's usually a clear indication there's things you don't know.
The money is coming by other means.
Right.
Well, that's a good point. And it's also important to note that a lot of magazines today are basically picture books. And if you don't see ads and there's very little written word,
Right.
then you're looking at a picture book advertorial, and that's basically what you've got in your hand.
Most likely. Everything needs to be financed, everything. So you have to, the important thing is to clearly define how is the money coming in to support this publication. People need to eat and pay their rent. I mean, it's just a fact of life. If you can't tell how that's happening, there's a good indication that it might be hidden advertorial.
Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I work for a vendor. That's what I do. I work for WatchBox. When you print my articles, you always mention that I'm the WatchBox guy. And when I did a De Bethune article recently, you mentioned that my company is a majority stakeholder. So just in terms of disclosure, outstanding stuff. Ultimately, when you're looking for advertorial, how critically do you have to regard anything written by a vendor? So, for example, Hodinkee sells watches.
Right.
I sell watches. A blog to watch sells watch paraphernalia. How careful do you need to be when you're reading something written by a vendor? Is it ever journalism?
That's a very good question. I mean, De Bethune is a great example. Long before WatchBox was ever involved in De Bethune, you loved it. I loved it. I think in our world of really extreme journalism, I don't know anyone who doesn't love De Bethune. It's a crazy brand that was born out of passion. It's hard not to love it, right? It's a passionate brand, and we are all passionate about it. Because the company that pays your salary bought it, or part of it, invested in it, doesn't mean you love it less. And because we're associated with you, WatchBox, full disclosure, is one of our advertisers. Doesn't mean I love it less either, or love it more. I love De Bethune the same way I loved it beforehand.
And I'm just lucky. I live a charmed life. My company bought my favorite watch brand. Does that happen to you?
I know. It's a tough thing. I think what might be critical is, in our case, we have a lot of loyal readers. We have people who continuously come back to read what we write. I think they know us by now, and they can gauge. I think it's the sometime readers who might not understand how these things happen, which is why we put the full disclosure on we mark our articles that way.
And it is becoming increasingly difficult to separate vendors from journalists, because Fratello Watches now does co-collaborations with watch manufacturers. SJX now does branded collaborations with watch manufacturers. These are just things you need to keep in mind. Like, I always say, don't listen to influencers, even if it's me, and the same goes for watch writers sometimes.
Yeah. I'll try to push my love on you as well, but it's only love. We don't sell anything.
Yeah, hard love from her. So now, does it get any easier to cover independence? Since, we just had Ludovic Balloir in here. He has no advertising. He makes 12 watches a year.
Right.
No one is taking money from him.
Right.
Is it easier to discuss independence, frankly, than a Richemont Swatch or Kering Group brand, something like that?
It is easier, but you must also understand that whatever you write could influence the way an independent is able to survive. So there was this one instance a few years ago in which a major independent had a co-creation with, it was a questionable co-creation. It was not immediately understood where this came from, and one of the writers at one of the major blogs criticized it deeply. It was a mistake. He admitted later it was a mistake to have done that. Now, this independent wouldn't be touched by that, but if that was a new independent starting out who was maybe just trying to get by and survive with a co-creation, that might have influenced how the rest of that independent's career went. That could have been a major marker for that independent in a young career. So I think it's also really important as an influencer or someone who has a voice in this industry to understand how what you write or what you say may have a real influence on people listening or reading. And that's important to know. You can't just, sit down at midnight and splash something out. That's not a good way to do things.
No, you do sort of hold their fate in your hand. And
Yeah.
I've seen this in the world of boutique auto manufacturing, where one bad review from a mainstream auto magazine can ruin a brand. And that's it. That's over. The people lose their job. The thing closes down. At the same time, you do need to protect yourself. And I've often said that commissioning a bespoke watch is like commissioning a work of fine art. And artisans can be temperamental. How can people protect themselves? Because some of these guys have reputations, and and without naming names, how do you go about doing your diligence when getting into independent watchmaking?
Right. Well, it is tough because they're rare watches. Not everybody gets to handle them. I think it's great when you do your reviews, because WatchBox is a platform where you get to handle everything, right? You get to see the rarest things that most of us have never seen. We get to read about it or hear about it, but never see it. So I think it is important to listen to you in some ways, because you just have more experience than the rest of us sometimes in handling these things. But for me, I interview independents, but I also talk to the collectors, and I try to paint a full picture, because you can't just paint a one-sided picture. You can talk to the creator of something and understand the story and where he's coming from, but you need to have the full story. How did that product continue to live its life after it left his workshop?
Yeah, and that's very important. It's so easy to fall in love with a person you meet, so charming, ebullient, wonderful products on the table at a trade show, but go on Google and search that person's name plus the word lawsuit. Ask other collectors about what the service experience and the warranty experience was like. There are forums for everyone. People who make 6 watches a year have fan forums and collector bases, and you need to speak to them. And again, a quick Google search can pull up past litigation, which almost always results from some of these guys who have scattershot histories and leave a wake of destruction. So as with custom cars and bespoke art, luxury watches at the independent level need to be considered the work of an artiste in every sense of that word, and you need to protect yourself, because you may not be able to find a whole lot of people with real-world experience, especially if they're overseas. I mean, if 5 guys from Singapore were the first clients, you may have no way to access that. So use all your resources when you get into independence, especially when they're really small or really new.
Yeah, and today we're very lucky. We have the internet. The collector world is really interlocked now. We can all talk to each other. In the early days, you really had to be an insider. You had to go to the fairs, you had to go to the get-togethers, and not many people did, right? So information, especially on the independents, was so hard to come by. Honestly, today it's a whole lot easier. Just a Google search usually.
Yeah, I just walk over there. we've got all the independents in the world 200 feet away.
Right.
But in all honesty, let's talk a little bit about how the market has changed. I would say 3 years ago there was interest in independents, but the market hadn't gone nuclear.
Right.
What changed since the last Dubai Watch Week? What propelled this explosion?
I have been looking into this for about the last 6 months. It's an explosion that was caused by literally a perfect storm. It's some of the behavior of the big brands and the groups, which left room on retail shelves for independents and new brands to come in, which was followed by the COVID crisis, really.
Yes.
People were at home. They had discretionary funds to spend. They had time to read and research, and the independents were flexible and could react in a really quick way to what was happening and what the demand is. In an independent like Max Broussa of MB&F, he reacted so perfectly that he was able to continue his business as if nothing had happened. And that's now they're all experiencing it, but this was already in the first part of the pandemic. So basically, I would chalk it up to a perfect storm. But what has happened is that these people not only found the independents, but they're staying with them. They have 2-year waiting lists, 5-year waiting lists. Several have announced they're not taking any new clients until they can work off all the orders they have right now. This is an extraordinary situation. Never seen this before.
And it's interesting because it seems like initially Richard Mille went nuclear.
Right.
Then F.P. Journe. When F.P. Journe went crazy, all of a sudden there was a run on MB&F. And then the Grunefelds decided they were going to stop accepting orders. And it's almost as though we're seeing this escalating series of closeouts, years-long wait lists, brands that are effectively unable to deliver product. And it started with the major players, but now it's down to people who make as few as 6, 7, 8, 10 watches a year.
Right. Orvac, they have like a 3-year waiting list right now. And Felix told me even this week, 150 watches per year is what they have made always. It is what he will continue to make. He will not change his policy. So, it's just it for right now. And he has a waiting list. I don't know how long it is. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. Who else? Debetune.
Yeah.
You couldn't get one to save your life right now, except maybe at WatchBox.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to see the things no one can have, but even I can't afford them. But I would say this, with Urwerk, for example, that's not a new brand. Urwerk first exhibited at Basel in 1997, and if the brand was going to go nuts, it had plenty of time to do so. So here we are, 24 years later, and this brand, which is one of the original modern independents, is really, for the first time, finding that it has no spare capacity. It's having to decline orders, and I guess the wait list is theoretical, because in many cases they're not taking more names. But what the phenomenon is new, many of the brands aren't. So at this point, I guess it's important to ask, are social media and auctions propelling a lot of this momentum? I mean, I admit as a vendor, we're huge into Journe. We love Debetune enough to buy them. We have a lot of other independents with which we have no commercial relationship. But yes, we've been a factor. Vendors have been a factor. To what extent has social media and the auction house been a factor?
It's given everyone the ability to. It has made them visible in a way they haven't been up to now. Social media, for sure.
Yes.
The auctions, wow, I mean, they're experiencing a lot of the same things that the independents are right now. I mean, the auction world is booming like it's never done. For example, here's a good example. Ineichen, which is a small auction house in Zurich, just set 3 world records for independents. Have you ever heard of this auction house?
Nope.
There you go. That's my answer right there. People are looking for the independent pieces. They're looking everywhere they can, and they're even searching out these small auction houses. I mean, in the United States, there's 3 or 4 that no one's ever heard of either. They regularly have Vacheron Constantin, various little brands or whatever. In Europe, the little auction houses generally have jewels. They have crown jewels that no one sees because you're not aware of these little places. But they're going to become bigger now because people are looking. They're looking for it.
I'm wondering, because this is a relatively new phenomenon, but Gary G for a long time has given the collector's perspective on your website in print, long form. But on social media, I guess just the last 3, 4 years, we've witnessed the rise of the celebrity watch collector. Like, not a person who makes watches and not a dealer, but a person who just mass posts stuff he buys and stuff he sees. I think that's kind of an underrated factor in the market today, because we've got a lot of people we know only by their Instagram handle, but we know that they have a net worth of 7, 8 figures because of the watches they show. Is that helpful? That's a really good question.
I know Gary G himself is of 2 minds on this. I think it's a little more transparency in the collector world is interesting. It's good for us to know, and you get this long-term opinion of these watches. He commissions bespoke watches on a regular basis, and he will continue to talk about them and show them, et cetera, et cetera. He talks about his buying and selling and trading practices, which I think is helpful for everyone, right? But on the other hand, this celebrity, this Instagram famous thing, I'm not sure what that is doing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it brings anything to the table. I think you need to do something. You need to educate and inform. That's a service in and of itself. I think you need to create transparency in the market, and that comes from a marketplace where prices are listed and pricing history exists. And really, I'll give auction houses credit for this. Like, when we sell a watch at WatchBox, we don't leave a pricing history. We take the watch down. When a watch sells at auction, you have that result almost forever online where anyone can see it. So transparency is a good thing. I'm not sure that the celebrity watch collector really educates or informs in a meaningful way or creates any transparency about what he paid, where he got it, or how he got access.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I like collectors like Gary and some of the others who they educate everyone, right? They're especially since most of them are patrons of the independents and love the independent scene. And I think it's important to help the general public understand these artists, and artists they are, and they used to be struggling, and now hopefully they can, hopefully this isn't a bubble for the independents, because they deserve this recognition and they deserve this stability.
Does it seem oddly random which brands catch fire? Because, there's some brands that have been around for a long time. Beauvais, Moritz Grossmann, I mean, Laurent Ferrier.
Yeah.
All these companies have, a decade, 2 decades or more. Beauvais, it's been in Pascal Raffi's hands for 20 years, but it predates that.
Yeah.
Why aren't those things on the tip of everyone's tongue? Why aren't they on social media?
It's a good question, but Beauvais is I would call it an independent, even though it's a bigger operation.
1,100 watches a year, just for our audience to know.
Yeah, exactly. And they do very well. It's a super stable company that sells very well, especially this region. In the Middle East, Beauvais is a very big name. And in China, where they had their roots. I think it's the styling, because it's very specific. Some watches are, right now we have this sort of bubble with the sports watches.
Without
because
a doubt.
it's a style that appeals to a very large amount of people. If you get into the more ornate things, or the things that need more explanation because it's more artisanal or artistic, or uses techniques that are not everyday, so it needs more explanation, it becomes more difficult to for a larger amount of people to really grasp at a glance. And I think that's the difference.
The challenge for me is to understand Laurent Ferrier, because here we are with these Gallet micro rotors, beautiful watches, FP Journe Chronomètre Bleu, Philippe Dufour's Simplicity, Carré Vaudelin and Vent Huit, Regepi Chronomètre Contemporain. And I put the Gallet micro rotor next to those with its enamel dial and its gorgeous biomorphic case. I'm like, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things does not sell at 3 times its list price. So what's going on there?
That's a very good question. I don't think I know the answer to it either. When it debuted, I can't remember which year it is, but it dropped like a bomb, because it was the first super fine finished new escapement movement that we had seen in a while, right? But I agree with you, it stagnated a bit, and I don't know why. I can't.
I mean,
I don't know.
The company makes 170 watches a year. They're beautifully made. The only thing I can reason, the only theory I've got, is that the annual calendar, the Montre École case, the Bridge 1, they had a couple of model years where the debuts went flat, and no one really saw them as equal to the early efforts. That, and maybe there's just too much prejudice against companies that aren't, quote, manufacturers. And Laurent Ferrier wasn't always open about what an établisseur it is.
Yes, that can happen, especially in today's transparent watch world. When things start to come out that weren't really communicated the right way at the beginning, that can happen. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's just also the case shape, which is unusual. Round cases tend to be the most common ones, and people want. Shaped cases, and the Ferrier cases are shaped, tend to do a little less well. That's just a normal fact of watches.
So at this point, segue into what we've seen here. What impressed you? It's been a while since we've been at the show.
For me, there is a star of this show, an absolute star that just outshines everybody else, and that is the collaborative MB&F and Bulgari piece, the Flying T Allegra, which is a stunning piece of art. The Flying T is a beautiful watch all by itself. I have loved every iteration of it. It is, for me, one of the shining stars of this watch industry at the moment. And the combination with the Bulgari touches, the redesign, there's a redesigned case, it sits differently on the wrist, and of course those lovely Bulgari jewels in their house style, it is irresistible.
And I would have to say, having seen it for the first time, the Chronométre Ferdinand Berthoud FB2, which is their round case, it's the one with regular lugs, deadbeat second, enamel dial, certified chronometer. It has a fusee and chain, and it has a remontoir, 2 constant force devices. They went big, and they put themselves up in put up or shut up position with a COSC certification. You'd be amazed how many companies making tourbillon will not attach any claim of accuracy to a watch like that. And how it's not a tourbillon, mind you, but it is a very sophisticated watch. There are other watches of tourbillon, that's also a chronometer. You look at the quality of the finish, and it's not just like the anglage is good or they frosted the base plate. There are facets that are so small, you wonder how they were even finished without a microscope. And I'll be honest, it's not an independent product. We talk about the soul and the elan of these independent brands. Chopard is a billion-dollar company, and they're the folks behind Berthoud. And honestly, I can't say enough good things about it. It was transcendent.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been doing fantastic work. They're insanely good watches.
Are we going to see watch shows come back? Will there ever be another Basel as we knew it, or even a regular SIHH?
I hate to say it, I think Basel World just might be over. Watches and Wonders, which is what SIHH has now morphed into, is going to have to work hard to preserve itself. It's up in the air. And now with the new COVID strains and everything coming back, we don't know how this is going to fall out up to the spring. So we could be back in lockdowns. Anything could happen between now and April. I'll tell you though, it was too hard to do a digital watch fair last year, and I don't think I would do that again.
Don't blame me.
It was all of the work and none of the fun.
I've been there. I've been there, like publishing just off press releases and press photos, and it's not as cool as getting to try the watch.
Right.
So I guess I'll say between Quill Pad and WatchBox, we'll see you on the web. Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.